He had seen pain before, but nothing like this. Nothing that made his chest feel tight without even knowing the story behind it. The girl was crouched near the garbage behind the general store, barefoot and bald, hunched like a broken branch. Her skin was pale under the heat, feet covered in dirt and bleeding, and she was picking scraps from a pig's trough with shaking hands. For a second, Malachi just stood there, unable to move. He'd passed through dying towns, seen hunger and bruises on children's faces, but this looked like something people turned their eyes away from because it made them feel too much. She looked up the moment she noticed him. Her body flinched back against the wooden wall, and her eyes, wide, dark, and terrified, locked onto his. She looked about 17, maybe younger. Her clothes were shredded and stained. Her face was bruised, her arms marked with cuts, and she held her side like it hurt to breathe. It was her eyes, though, that stopped him cold. They didn't plead. They didn't even blink. They were empty, like she'd stopped hoping for anything a long time ago. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice soft and low. He crouched slowly, staying a few feet away so she wouldn't panic. He reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of hardtack. The girl looked at the food like it wasn't real. Her fingers twitched, but she didn't move. "It's all right," he said. "Just eat. No tricks." Still, she hesitated. She kept watching his face, trying to figure out what he wanted from her. But hunger won. Her hand shook as she reached for the hardtack, and she bit into it so fast it startled him. She chewed like someone who hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. Malachi felt something twist in his gut. He didn't know who she was or where she came from, but somebody had done this to her. Somebody thought she wasn't worth saving. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer, just kept chewing, eyes on him like he might change any second. He tried again in broken Spanish, then in a little German. Nothing worked. She just stared. When the hardtack was gone, she looked at him again, waiting for something, maybe punishment. Malachi heard footsteps. He turned and saw Deputy Morrison coming around the corner, one hand resting on his belt. "Well, look what you found," Morrison said. His voice had a coldness that made the girl freeze again. "We've been looking for that one all morning." Someone saw a bald Chinese girl stealing bread from the bakery. Malachi stood, positioning himself in front of her. "She's hurt," he said. "She needs help, not a jail cell." Morrison smirked. "Help? Stranger, you don't know what you're getting into. This girl's been nothing but trouble since she crawled into town, and folks are starting to talk about anyone who defends her." The threat was clear. Malachi could feel her trembling behind him. Whatever she'd run from, it wasn't over. Morrison's fingers tapped closer to his gun. "Step aside," Morrison said. "She's got a debt to pay. Harboring a thief makes you part of the problem." Malachi kept his voice calm. "What kind of debt?" "Work debt," Morrison replied. Chin gave her a place to stay. Fed her. Nursed her back. Now she works it off. Malachi clenched his jaw. He'd seen towns like this before, where debt was just another kind of cage. But this felt different. Meaner. "And if she can't work?" Malachi asked. "She starves," Morrison said without blinking. Simple as that. No English. No family. Who's going to help her? She's just a burden. Malachi turned slightly and looked at the girl again. Her head wasn't shaved clean. It was hacked, nicked, rushed. Whoever had done it wasn't trying to groom her. They were marking her. "Maybe I pay the debt," Malachi said, the word surprising even him. Morrison snorted. "You? A drifter with torn boots and empty pockets." "How much?" Malachi asked. $50. Plus interest." Malachi's chest tightened. That was a year's wages in most places. And from the sound of it, the debt was made to never be repaid. "If I can't pay it all at once?" he asked. Morrison's smile turned cruel. "Then you become Chin's problem too." Malachi felt the girl press closer to his back. She didn't need to understand the words. She understood exactly what was happening, and he was the only thing standing between her and being dragged back to whatever nightmare she'd barely escaped from. The girl clutched Malachi's coat like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Her grip was desperate, her whole body shaking. When he looked down at her, she was shaking her head, silently begging him not to let them take her. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Everything in her face said the same thing. Please don't let them hurt me again. Morrison stepped forward and reached for her arm. Enough talk, he said. She's coming with me. But just as he got close, the girl let out a sound, low and painful, a sound that froze both men in place. She dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around herself, and rocked back and forth, letting out a soft wailing that didn't sound human. It was heartbreak, fear, and exhaustion all wrapped in one broken noise. Morrison pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. She's touched in the head, he muttered. Told you she's nothing but trouble. Malachi knelt beside her, heart racing. He could feel it now. Whatever had been done to her, it was worse than what Morrison had said. This girl had been broken, not just hurt. Shaved, beaten, locked away. And now, all alone, she had no one but him. I'll find the money, Malachi said, still watching her. Just give me time. Morrison laughed, the sound sharp like glass. Time? Shouldn't want her back yesterday. You've got until sundown, stranger. After that, she goes back. And you best be out of town. The words hung heavy in the air. Malachi watched the deputy walk away, dust rising behind his boots. $50. He had barely $3 in his pocket. No job, no plan, and no one to help. And now this girl's life, maybe her soul, depended on him. She looked up at him then, still on her knees, but something was different. She wasn't rocking anymore. Her eyes, though still hollow, were focused on his. Not hopeful exactly, but searching, waiting to see what he'd do next. I don't know how yet, Malachi whispered, but I'm going to help you. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. He helped her to her feet. She flinched when her left leg touched the ground, and her face twisted in pain. Her bare feet were worse than he thought. Not just bruised, infected. Red lines crawled up her ankles, and the smell of rot was faint but real. First things first, he murmured. You need shoes. And a doctor. He guided her out of the alley and onto the street. The moment they stepped into view, everything stopped. People turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Women pulled their children close. Men's hands dropped to gun handles. Every eye watched them pass like they were a disease walking. That's her, someone whispered. The Chinese girl. The one with the sickness. She's got some kind of plague, another said. Malachi kept walking, jaw tight. The girl walked as close to his side as possible, her shoulders low, her eyes on the dirt. She knew what this meant. She wasn't welcome, and now neither was he. They reached the doctor's office, a small building with painted letters on the glass. Malachi opened the door, and the doctor looked up. Dr. Henley was a thin man with kind eyes, but when he saw the girl, his face changed. I can't treat her, he said before Malachi could even speak. Mr. Chun gave orders. No one helps her unless he says so. She's sick, Malachi said. Her feet are infected. She needs medicine or she'll lose them. The doctor looked torn. He glanced at the girl, then back at Malachi. If I treat her without permission, I could lose my license. I'm sorry. They left without another word. As they stepped outside, the girl stumbled. Malachi caught her before she fell. She was weaker than she looked, infection and hunger dragging her down fast. Malachi Thorne, a voice called out. He turned. A woman was walking toward him, maybe in her 50s. Her dress was simple but clean, her face lined but strong. I'm Mrs. Adelaide Crawford, she said. I run the boarding house. I saw what happened in the alley. That girl needs help. I'm trying, Malachi said. But this town already made up its mind about her. Mrs. Crawford's jaw tightened. This town made up its mind about a lot of things, most of them wrong. She glanced around, then stepped closer and pressed something into Malachi's hand. A small cloth pouch. It jingled softly. It's not enough to clear her debt, she said, but it might buy you time. And there's something else you should know. About Chun. About where that girl really came from. She looked around once more, then said, Follow me. Malachi and the girl followed her behind the boarding house. The girl moved slow, each step painful, but she didn't complain. Her silence wasn't just fear. It was the silence of someone who'd learned that making noise only brought punishment. When they reached the back, Mrs. Crawford turned and lowered her voice. Chun didn't rescue that girl. He bought her. Malachi frowned. 3 weeks ago, a wagon passed through, she said. Chinese workers heading to the railroad. One wagon broke down. That girl was in the back, in chains. Malachi stared at Mrs. Crawford. Chains? She nodded slowly. Wrist irons. Shackles on her ankles. She wasn't traveling with them. She was cargo. The girl looked between them, not understanding the words, but her eyes were wide with fear. Mrs. Crawford's voice softened. The men said she was indentured. Said she was working off her family's debt. Malachi clenched his fists. He'd heard that word before, indentured, the way men dressed up slavery with contracts and promises. But he could see the truth in Mrs. Crawford's face. I've seen enough to know what it really means, she said. The girl started crying then, silent tears running down her cheeks. The first emotion Malachi had seen from her besides terror. Mrs. Crawford put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Chen bought her when the wagon broke. Paid the men to leave her behind. Said he needed help in his business. Didn't mention what kind of help. Malachi's voice was tight. And the town just let it happen? Chen owns a saloon, she said. The brothel. Half the stores on Main Street. He brings in money, jobs. People don't ask questions. She looked at the girl. But this one she fought back. That's why she looks like this. He shaved her head to shame her. Kept her locked up. Barely fed her. How did she get away? There was a fire 3 days ago in Chen's back rooms. In the confusion, she ran. Malachi felt like the world shifted beneath him. Now it made sense. The panic, the bruises, the silence. Chen hadn't rescued her. He was hunting her. Suddenly the girl pointed past Mrs. Crawford's shoulder, panic in her eyes. Malachi turned. 2 men were walking fast toward them. One of them was Chun. Chun looked polished, out of place in this dusty town. His coat was fine. His eyes were not. Cold, sharp. The man beside him was taller, rougher, and armed. Mrs. Crawford, Chun called. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Mrs. Crawford stepped in front of the girl. She's not a thing. She doesn't belong to anyone. Chen's smile was tight. She is indentured. I have papers. He patted his coat. Very expensive to bring her here. She must work to repay. What kind of work? Malachi asked, though he already knew. Whatever I say, Chun replied. Malachi stepped between them. The girl pressed against his back again. Chen's voice dropped. You want to play hero? You pay her debt. Malachi didn't move. How much? $50. Plus interest. Malachi's jaw clenched. He didn't even have 5. What if someone else works it off? Chen narrowed his eyes. Who? You. Malachi reached into his coat and pulled something out. A warm badge. U.S. Marshal. The other man flinched. I'm not just a stranger, Malachi said. I've been tracking people like you. For years. Chen's smile vanished. You bluffing. Am I? Malachi held up the badge. I know what you're running. I know how many have disappeared near railroad camps. I send a telegram. This whole town will be crawling with federal marshals. Chen's face turned red. His man shifted his hand toward his gun, but Chen stopped him. This not over, Chun snapped. You don't know what you started. He turned and left, but the girl was still frozen in place. Mrs. Crawford let out a breath. A marshal. That explains a lot. Malachi nodded. I resigned 3 months ago. Sometimes the law isn't enough. The girl stared up at him. You saved me, she asked in broken English. For now, Malachi replied. But Chen won't stop. He's got too much to lose. Mrs. Crawford nodded. Chen owns too many people in this town, including the deputy. Even if we get her out, he'll come after her. Then we don't run, Malachi said. We finish it. How, she asked. You're one man. Malachi turned to the girl. The fire. The one where you escaped. Tell me about it. The girl's voice shook. I start fire. Chun, he hurt other girl. I try stop. He locked me. So I burn papers. Malachi blinked. What kind of papers? She pointed to her head. Names. Many names. Girls. Boys. Where from? Where to? Money papers. Who he pay? Mrs. Crawford's hand flew to her mouth. She destroyed his records. The girl nodded. He angry. Say I cost him much money. He want me back. To punish. To scare others. Malachi understood now. It wasn't just work. Chen wanted to make her an example. She'd burned his whole operation to the ground. And if he didn't get those records back, he couldn't track the others, couldn't collect his debts. Then a noise interrupted them. Voices outside. A crowd was gathering. Mrs. Crawford peeked through the curtain. Deputy Morrison's with them, and Chen's men. The girl's fear returned in full. "They come for me," she whispered. Malachi put a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said. "They're coming for me." Malachi moved to the window. He saw Morrison out front, barking orders. Behind him were men with guns, faces hard with anger or fear. Some were townspeople, others clearly hired hands. Malachi recognized a few. The butcher, the store clerk. Ordinary men now turned against him. Not because of what he'd done, but because of who he was protecting. "They're saying you're hiding a criminal," Mrs. Crawford said. "That she's dangerous." "She's a child," Malachi replied, keeping his eyes on the crowd. "They won't see that. Chen's poisoned them." May, that was the name she had whispered, stood by the wall, small and silent. The brief flicker of hope in her eyes had vanished. "I go," she said softly. "I tell them I steal. They leave you." "No," Malachi said firmly. "No one else gets sacrificed." The front door rattled as someone tested it. Morrison's voice rang out. "Last warning, Thorne. Open the door or we break it down." May clung to Malachi's coat again, but this time her hands weren't shaking. She was trying to be brave. "There's something else," she whispered. "Paper. I saved one before fire. Hide." She reached into her tattered dress and pulled out a damp, folded piece of paper. She handed it to Mrs. Crawford, who opened it carefully. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she breathed. "These are names. Town names. Men who paid Chun. Deputies. Businessmen. Judges." Malachi's heart pounded. That's why Chun was confident. He doesn't just own property. He owns people. Mrs. Crawford's voice dropped. "Mayor's name is here. So is the sheriff. That's our way out," Malachi said. "But first, we have to survive tonight." The door shuttered under a hard kick. Morrison shouted again. "Open up." Malachi looked at the others. "Is there a back way out?" "There is," Mrs. Crawford said. "But even if we run, where would we go? Chin owns everything around here." "I'm not running," Malachi said. "But I need time. Just enough." The door exploded inward, sending wood splinters flying. Morrison stormed in, gun drawn, 6 armed men behind him. "Hands up," he barked. "Now." Malachi raised his weapon, steady and calm. "I've got a better idea, deputy. How about you lower yours, and we talk like men?" "You're outnumbered," Morrison snarled. "Don't be stupid." 7-1, said a voice from the doorway. "But who's counting?" Dr. Henley stepped in, rifle in hand. Behind him were 6 more townspeople, the blacksmith, the telegraph operator, and others. All armed, all silent. "What the hell is this?" Morrison growled, swinging his gun between them. "It's called a reckoning," Dr. Henley said. "We've watched Chun too long." Someone finally stood up. "We're standing with him." "You fools," Morrison snapped. "Chun has legal papers." "No," the blacksmith interrupted. "He has forgeries. And we've seen what he paid you, Morrison. Every dollar." May stood frozen, eyes wide. These were the same people who'd ignored her, now pointing guns for her. Morrison's eyes darted around. "Even if that's true, you can't prove." "Actually," Henley said, pulling out a folded telegram, "I can. I sent this to the territorial capital. They've been investigating human trafficking for months. They want Chun." A shadow appeared in the doorway. Chun stepped in, his voice booming. "Enough. That girl is mine. I have contract." "She's a child," Malachi said. "And last I checked, slavery's still illegal. It's indenture." Chun shouted. "Her family owed money. I paid it." "No," Dr. Henley said softly. "Her family is dead. Murdered 2 months ago. You bought her from the men who killed them." The words hit May like a bullet. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing for the first time. Mrs. Crawford dropped beside her, holding her close. Chin's calm cracked. "So what? I gave her food, a place to sleep, better than gutter. You made her a slave," Malachi said, gun steady. "And you were going to do worse." Morrison lunged, aiming for Malachi, but the shot came too late. Malachi's bullet shattered his wrist, and the gun clattered to the floor. Chin's men reached for their weapons, but stopped when they saw the townspeople raising theirs. "It's over, Chun," Dr. Henley said. The marshals are coming. You can leave in chains or in a coffin. Chen's face was twisted with rage. You think this changes anything? There are more like me. You saved one girl. That's all. Malachi didn't flinch. That's enough to start. Chen reached into his coat. Malachi tensed, but he pulled out keys, not a weapon. He tossed them at Lai Mei's feet. Keys to wagon, he spat. Take your girl. Go. But she will never be safe. Not in this world. Lai Mei stared at the keys. What happened now? She asked in her broken English. Mrs. Crawford helped her stand. Now, she said softly, you get to choose your own life. 3 days later, Lai Mei stood in front of a mirror in Mrs. Crawford's boarding house. Her fingers moved slowly across her scalp, feeling the soft new hair starting to grow. Her feet were bandaged, the swelling had gone down, and the infection was finally healing. Dr. Henley had taken care of her wounds. Real meals had brought color back to her cheeks. The thin, terrified girl from the alley was still there, but now something else was coming through. Life. She wore a plain dress Mrs. Crawford had altered to fit her small frame. She touched the fabric carefully, still getting used to having clothes that weren't torn or stained. Her reflection didn't frighten her anymore. She didn't look like property. She looked like a person. Federal marshals had arrived the day after the standoff. Chun and 3 of his men were arrested immediately. Deputy Morrison was taken in too, facing charges for bribery and abuse of power. The marshals said his prison sentence would be long. What started with one girl had led to the uncovering of something much bigger, a trafficking network across 3 territories. Lai Mei's testimony was helping them trace names, towns, and more victims. Malachi found her in the garden behind the boarding house, kneeling beside a row of vegetables. She was pulling weeds carefully, her hands dirty but steady. The sun was warm on her back. She looked peaceful. He stepped up quietly. The marshals want to talk to you again tomorrow, he said. They need more names from the camps. Lai Mei nodded. I remember. I tell them everything. Help them find others. She sat back, wiping her hands on her dress, then looked up at him. You go with them? Malachi had been thinking about it. The marshals offered him his badge back. A chance to keep hunting men like Chun. To keep fighting. But that meant leaving. Leaving her. Leaving this place. I don't know yet, he admitted. What would you want me to do? She was quiet for a long time, thinking. Then she said, before bad men come, in China, my family had farm. Small farm. But good life. I know how to grow things. How to make things live. She looked around the garden, then toward the house. Mrs. Crawford say she need help with boarding house. Maybe I stay. Work for real wages. Save money. Malachi smiled gently. That sounds like a good plan. She also say, you good man. But no home. Maybe you tired of chasing bad men. Maybe time to stay. Help grow good things. Her eyes met his. Something about the way she said it struck deep. For 3 years, Malachi had chased darkness. He'd followed trails of broken people, hoping to fix what had once gone wrong in his own life. But now, here was a chance to build instead of destroy. Mrs. Crawford mentioned adding a stable, he said quietly. Expanding the house. Growing more food. She needs someone who knows horses. Someone who can lift heavy things. Lai Mei smiled, an honest, soft smile that reached her eyes. She say town need new sheriff. Real one. Who protect people. Malachi raised an eyebrow. You've had a lot of talks with Mrs. Crawford. She good woman. She teach me about America. About freedom. But most important thing she teach, some people, when they save you, they don't want to own you. They want to see you become what you were meant to be. Malachi looked at her. There was strength in her now. Not just survival. Something deeper. He nodded. Then I guess I'm staying. 6 months later, Malachi stood at the same alley where he'd first found her. But now, it didn't smell like garbage. It was the edge of a small market garden that supplied fresh vegetables to half the town. Lai Mei and Mrs. Crawford had turned the boarding house into something more. A safe place for travelers, immigrants, and workers who had nowhere else to go. Lai Mei's hair had grown long again. She wore it in a simple braid. She had filled out. Her English was better. She was confident now. Happy. Sheriff, she called out across the garden, laughing. She waved from where she stood with a young woman beside her, another girl rescued from a trafficking ring in a nearby territory. Mrs. Crawford say dinner soon. You bring appetite. Malachi smiled and touched the badge on his chest. Elected this time. Earned. The work was different now. Less chasing. More protecting. As he walked toward the house, he could smell stew cooking and hear laughter inside. And he remembered something Lime May once said, maybe it's time to grow good things. She had been right. Evening settled over the town in soft gold and gray. The streets, once filled with whispering and suspicion, now held quiet respect. The people had changed, not all at once, but enough. Enough to nod when Lime May passed them. Enough to stop calling her that girl and start using her name. Some even came to her for help. Mothers with sick children, travelers who didn't speak English, young girls with eyes full of fear. She helped them all without hesitation. Malachi watched her from the porch steps of the boarding house, coffee cooling in his hands. She moved through the garden like she belonged there, like she'd always belonged. He thought about the first time he saw her, curled beside a pig trough, barefoot, silent, looking like something forgotten by the world. That image still lived in his mind. But now it was side by side with this one, strong, steady, rebuilding. She doesn't even realize what she's become, Mrs. Crawford said, joining him on the steps. She thinks she's just surviving. But she's giving people hope. Malachi nodded. She gave me hope. You know, Mrs. Crawford added, a few years ago, I almost sold this place. Couldn't keep up with it. Thought maybe I'd leave town, start over. But then she came along. Now I'm thinking about building another room instead. Funny how that works, Malachi said. Mrs. Crawford looked over at him. You're not running anymore either, are you? No, he said. I'm not. At dinner, the boarding house was full. Workers came in for stew and bread. Girls helped clean up. Someone played a slow tune on a harmonica. Lime served bowls with a steady hand, laughing when the young one snuck extra rolls. She didn't try to stay invisible anymore. A knock at the door interrupted the noise. Malachi stood and opened it to find a marshal in uniform. They shook hands firmly. We need her, the marshal said quietly. The case is bigger than we thought. More towns, more names. Her memory is key. I know, Malachi said. I'll talk to her. That night, he found her sitting alone in the garden. The moonlight caught her braid, and her hand were covered in soil again. The marshals came, he said gently. She didn't look up. They want me to leave. No, they want your help. To find more girls. More men like Chun. She was quiet for a long time. I'm scared, she finally said. But I go. If it helps someone. You don't have to decide now, Malachi said. She looked at him. What if I leave, and it all happens again? He didn't lie to her. It might. But maybe this time, you won't be alone. She nodded slowly, eyes wet. I want them to know. The girls. I want them to know they're not alone either. The next morning, Lime May packed a small bag. Nothing heavy, just a clean dress, some food, and the pouch Mrs. Crawford gave her the day they first met. She stood at the door, looking back at the garden, the walls that had kept her safe, the people who had helped her breathe again. Come back to us, Mrs. Crawford said, hugging her tight. I will, she whispered. Malachi helped her into the wagon. The marshal waited with the reins. As they started moving, she leaned out and called, I teach others what you teach me. I show them how to grow things. Malachi stood there long after the wagon vanished down the road. He didn't move until the sun was high. Then he turned, walked back inside, and opened his notebook. He wrote down every name Lime May had remembered, every clue, every sign. Because if she was brave enough to go back into the darkness, then he would make sure the light stayed on here. And for the first time in years, he wasn't chasing ghosts. He was holding on to something real. Weeks passed, and the town slowly settled into something close to peace. Without Chun pulling the strings, things changed. The brothel closed. The saloon changed owners. Men who once looked the other way were now forced to answer questions they never thought they'd face. The town council was shaken up after the names on Lime May's list became public. Some ran. Some confessed. Some tried to lie their way out and failed. But the people noticed. They started expecting better, demanding it. Malachi spent his mornings on horseback, riding the outskirts. He checked on farms, met with traders, listened more than he talked. He wasn't just wearing the badge now. He was the law. Not the kind that scared people, but the kind that stayed and listened and did something when it mattered. Letters from May started arriving weekly. Her handwriting was small and careful, each letter signed with a little flower drawn at the bottom. She traveled with the marshals from town to town, helping others like her. She didn't tell him every story, but she told enough. We find 2 girls in Tucson, scared but alive. I teach a girl how to speak her name. She never said it before. Today I held a baby born in a shelter. His mother says she never thought she'd live to see him. The letters kept Malachi grounded. Every time he read one, he was reminded why he stayed, why he didn't leave with her. One afternoon, a package arrived. Inside was a wooden carving of a horse. Rough, but clearly made with care. Tied around its neck was a note. For when you miss chasing things. But now you chase good things, not bad. He kept it on his desk. Mrs. Crawford's boarding house was fuller than ever. Some girls who passed through stayed to help. One of them, May Lynn, had been rescued by May and later sent to the town for recovery. She barely spoke at first. Now she helped run the kitchen. She's starting to smile, Mrs. Crawford said one day. Just like the other one. They didn't say May's name every day, but she was always in the room somehow. That spring, Malachi planted trees near the garden, pear and apple. May had once said, trees take time, but when they grow, they give more than they take. So he planted them in her name. A reminder that something could grow out of pain. That something living could stand where something broken had fallen. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, a rider approached. A young boy with dust on his boots and a telegram in his hand. "It's for you, Sheriff," he said, handing it over. Malachi opened it slowly. We found the last ledger. Full names, payments, destinations. She was right all along. Operation ending soon. She asked if she could come home. He folded the paper carefully, a smile forming on his face. "Tell Mrs. Crawford," he said to the boy, "we need to get her room ready." The next morning, the whole town seemed to move a little lighter. Shopkeepers swept the walks without being asked. Kids played freely in the street. The fear that used to sit heavy on everything was fading. Malachi walked past the garden and stopped under the tree he planted. Its leaves were green now, just starting to fill in. He touched the bark with one hand and thought about what came next. The fight wasn't over. There were still men like Chun. Still girls like May out there. But here, in this place, something had changed. He heard the wheels of a wagon before he saw it. Dust rising on the road, horses moving slow and steady. And then, there she was. May sat beside the driver, her braid longer now, skin a little darker from sun. She jumped down before the wagon stopped and smiled. "You miss me?" she asked in her now clear English. "Every day," Malachi said. She walked toward him, and he didn't speak, just opened his arms. May stood in the middle of the garden she had once only walked through quietly, unsure if she even had the right to exist in it. Now, the rows of vegetables stretched neat and full, colors blooming from the soil like proof that something broken could still grow strong. The sun lit her face as she bent to pull a weed, then looked up toward the small house behind her, hers now, shared with Mrs. Crawford and the people they'd taken in. She had come back with more than a suitcase. She carried stories of girls who'd been pulled from darkness, of boys who found their names again, of places where silence had once been law and now filled with voices that refused to stay quiet. Her return had not been dramatic. No parades, no speeches, just steady footsteps toward home. Malachi stood nearby, watching as she helped a new arrival, a girl no older than she had been when he first found her. The girl was shaking, holding a broom like she might drop it any second. May placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said something soft, and the girl nodded. Then tried again. "That one will be all right," Mrs. Crawford said, walking up beside him. "She's in good hands," Malachi replied. May walked over to them, brushing her hands off on her skirt. "We have 6 girls staying now," she said. 3 working. 1 starting to read. 1 just learning how to sleep without fear. Malachi smiled. "You remember when you couldn't even speak a full sentence?" She grinned. "I'm still learning. But now I teach too." They sat down together on the porch steps. The air smelled like growing things and bread in the oven. Children laughed somewhere out of sight. "Town's different now," May said. "People look at me in the eye." They respect you, Malachi said. You earned that. Lime was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, You think there will always be men like Chun? Malachi didn't answer right away. Yes, he said finally. But there'll always be people like you too. That's what makes the fight worth it. She nodded. Sometimes I think, maybe the worst thing wasn't what happened to me. Maybe it would have been worse if I never got back up. Malachi looked at her. You did more than get back up. You helped others stand too. She took a deep breath. I don't want to be remembered as a girl who was saved. I want to be remembered as someone who didn't give up. You will be, Mrs. Crawford said. They sat in silence for a while, just watching the day move around them. Simple things. Normal things. A girl walked by carrying laundry. A boy ran through the yard chasing a dog. The world kept turning. A few hours later, they held a small dinner out back. The table was long and mismatched, surrounded by people who had once been strangers and were now something like family. Food was passed hand to hand. No one talked about the past, but it lived in all of them, not like a wound anymore, but like a map that had led them here. After dessert, one of the younger girls looked up at Lime. Can I be like you someday? She asked shyly. Lime leaned forward and said, You already are. The girl smiled and sat a little taller. Later that night, as stars filled the sky, Malachi stood outside alone. He looked up at the stars and thought about how far they'd come. He had spent years running from guilt, trying to undo what he'd lost. But in saving one girl, he'd found something he hadn't even realized he needed, a reason to stay, and a place to belong. The lesson was clear. Sometimes saving one life doesn't just change their world, it changes yours too. And no matter how dark things get, one act of kindness, one moment of courage, can light the way for others. You don't have to fix everything. You just have to show up. You just have to care. That's where healing begins. The girl with no hair, no name, and no shoes had become Lime Crawford, teacher, protector, and proof that no one is too broken to start again. And in helping her build a new life, Malachi Thorne had finally found his own.